Many of us have been blessed with being under the instruction of great teachers, people who've been our role models, they've been our mentors, even sometimes a parental figure. But what do you do when those people are gone and we have to fill the shoes? That's a very difficult thing to do, and even harder to create your own legacy in their shadow. Today, we're going to be talking to a man who has done that and more, Kyoshi Troy Price, on Black Belt Life. Welcome everyone to Black Belt Life. I'm Darren Myers, and I want to thank you for joining us today. Please feel free to hit that subscribe button. I think it's right over there. Okay, hit that button and subscribe to the channel so you'll know every time when we're going live and when we upload new videos. And also, leave us a comment if there is something that you would like to see, or someone you'd like to see us interview. Now, today we have our chat open so that you can ask our guest your questions that you want answered. And I'm sure he's really excited about off-the-cuff things like that could come from anybody. But anyway, we're going to give it a try. So, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome the head of the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai, 8th degree black belt, and a good friend, Mr. Troy Price. Welcome, sir.
The invite.
Absolutely. Good to have you. So my favorite question, just to get things started, is what got you started into martial arts?
That's kind of an interesting question. Growing up, I was a little guy. I'm still a little guy, but I had kind of a big mouth, and it always got me in trouble. So part of that was, well, at some point, I think it was about 17, I said, well, maybe I need to learn a little bit about how to protect myself. And so I started kind of looking around, for schools, and I happened to talk to a coworker of my sister's. And he said, oh, I know this awesome school. I've been training there. So he told me about the Columbia School of Karate Do, which was, Mr. Abel's school. And so I went, okay, let me go check it out. So I went over there and, took my first class, which was very interesting. Mr. Abel was out of town, and the person teaching the class was one of his senior students, which was actually a coworker of mine that I had no idea that he trained there. He was one of the lawyers at probation parole for the state of South Carolina, where I used to work. And so I walk in and I'm like, what is Bob DeComo doing here? And he was teaching the class. So I jumped in, had no idea what I was doing. And, he was doing some, rather advanced stuff. Well, at that time I thought it was advanced. And I was so lost. And I'm like, okay, about halfway through the class, I went, this is not for me. I'm not coming back. I'm done. Wasn't a good idea. So there was another black belt that came in named Rod Gardner, and he saw me struggling, and he grabbed me and took me off to the side, and he said, here, let me help you. So that last 20 minutes of the class, he's trying to show me some basic blocks, and I was still just so horrible at it. But he was very patient, just gave me some good insight, and was very encouraging. So when I left, I went, okay, that's it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not coming back. So it was like that was a Thursday. So over the weekend, I went, okay. I started thinking about it. Well, let me try those things that Rod Gardner showed me. So all weekend, I'm trying to do these 3 basic blocks. And I still was terrible at it. But I went, if Rod Gardner's teaching the class, I'll go back because I really like that guy. So I went back for the second class on like Tuesday, and I met Mr. Abel. He had been out of town. And after meeting him and taking class with him, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm staying. He had such an energy about him. You wanted to practice with him. And I remember him taking me into the office after class. And it was an interesting little talk we had, because he said, look, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, if you're going to do this, you make a commitment, you're going to do this for life. And you're telling someone 17 years old, make a commitment for life. I looked at him,
That's
thought about it for 30 seconds, and went, sure, okay, I'm in. And it's funny because I laugh about that. He was serious.
I'm
And,
sure. I'm sure. I
I
can
kind
see
of,
it.
and here I am, almost 40 years later, and still doing it. And so there was something to that little talk, that meeting of him. And then also, I tell Rod Gardner this story all the time. I said, if it wasn't for him, I would not be training today. And
Wow.
it's funny. He's still a good friend. I still go and teach over at his dojo, and he's just, I owe him a debt of gratitude, I guess you could say. So
Absolutely, sure. And you had, I mean, such a great upbringing in martial arts, such an honor and a privilege to be a student of the late Hanshi Ridgely Abel, who was just such an amazing instructor. He was so scientific about it, yet he brought in all of the character traits, blended those into his classes so well. He was such a respectable role model and just an incredible martial artist. Um, what do you think was the greatest lesson you gained from Hanshi Abel?
that's interesting. You could kind of break that down into three components, almost like you were saying. I always think of the idea of body, mind, spirit, and he had all three of those in a sense that the classes were technical, meaning looking at body mechanics, proper body, biomechanics, I guess you could say, and learning efficiency of motion. So everything was, he would explain in detail, the technique, what muscles are you using? What is your muscular structure when you do this? So everything was really, like you said, very scientific. And I think those foundations today allow me to do what I do today, because having a strong sense of frame and structure and mechanics, that doesn't go away. As when you're young, you're strong, you're vibrant, you're fast, you can kind of get away with a lot just by using muscular strength. But when you have good structure, frame, and good biomechanics, that lasts forever. And actually, that'll end up being more efficient and more powerful than just relying on muscular strength. And he had a way to communicate that. That was really, I think, his superpower. He could use analogies, and the way that he would explain things, he would, I wasn't that smart necessarily, but he could explain it in a way that even I could get it. And when you can do that's truly a superpower. And then
Right.
the next part was, the second component would be wisdom teachings. He was just, he had a unique way of teaching not only a physical class, but you got a lesson, a life lesson out of that class. And it was like every time it was just amazing. You'd walk away like, wow, like he knew something that was going on in my life, even though he didn't, but it was just very interesting that he would bring up something that would be very meaningful, would give you a lesson or a perspective on, something that was going on in your life. And, he always, as well as the idea of he helped you see beyond the obvious, and especially within, combative techniques. I can see things that most people don't see now because of the teachings that he gave me. When I look at emotion, I see so many things with that one motion that it wasn't obvious if you just, from the surface. But he gave me that perspective, the way to look at things. And then his teaching style was, it was always about positive reinforcement. Instead of saying, well, that's wrong, don't do that, he would point out something good that you did, and then you'd go, okay, look at this. This will help improve that. So you always walked away going, okay, that was good. He would say, keep doing that, but add this.
Right.
And to me, that's a much more, enjoyable way to learn than everything you do is bad.
Right.
Then you get frustrated. And then, of course, the third component of, spiritual, in a sense that he was a very devoted spiritual man, devoted Christian. And he had this sense of, right and wrong. And
Very much so, yeah.
Like I said, character to believe. And we would have to, the little phrases, you remember some of the things that he used to have us kind of repeat. It started for the kids, like, for example, actions have what? Consequences. So we are responsible. little things like there's no excuse for bad
Bad
manners.
manners.
And then he would have words like, character, and you would have to, recite the meaning, and the idea of character, a belief system of rights and wrongs where you choose to do the right thing every single time, no matter what the cost. And it's funny, those little things are still, here. I still have those. I still remember those. And they made a big difference. I mean, especially when you're, when I started, like I said, 17, and, you're trying to find your way in the world. I'm out working. And you can go a lot of different directions, and to have someone kind of guide you in a positive direction, it truly, I wonder if I'd be in jail or who knows what.
we all wonder that. Not about you, but about ourselves.
But with those kind of lessons, and so for me, I'd say it's all three of those things were some of the biggest things that I got from him. Along with just the friendship and him taking me all over the country and all over the world, actually.
Yeah, because you got to travel with him on many of his trips and seminars and camps he would teach. You're very fortunate to have that kind of time with him as well. So, and those character traits that you're talking about, we teach those, and we borrowed those from him and teach them in our dojo because I just felt they were so important, and the way he would slide them into, the
right.
techniques and things like that. It was like, it was genius. It really was.
And I tell you, one of the biggest, I'd say compliments to him is when I travel to different dojos, I'll see people have taken what we'd call Abel-isms, those little things, and they put them on a chart and they hang them on their wall, and they've been framed, these little sayings that he had.
Right.
And I see them, they're in his book, and people have taken them and they went, that's really special. I'm going to put that up on the wall. I want my kids to know that. I want my students to recite that. And to me, that just makes me so proud when I see that.
Oh, I can imagine. That's a great.
And I was going to say, talking about, I might be jumping ahead, but, traveling with him, it was interesting because as a white belt, I started traveling with him. And I remember one of the first seminars he was going to teach, I think I'd only been training maybe 2 or 3 months. And he liked someone to drive. And I had a car, and I like to drive. So I volunteered. He's like, who wants to go? I'll go. And he said, oh, good. Do you have a car? I went, yeah. So I remember driving, I think it was up to Asheville somewhere. I can't remember exactly where. And I had such a blast. I went, wow, because he would teach things sometimes at seminar settings that we didn't necessarily get in a regular class.
Sure.
And I'd come back and I'd be doing something, and other students like, oh, where'd you get that? I went, oh, Hanshi taught that at this seminar. Really? I go, well, you can go too.
Yeah, that's right.
but rarely it was unfortunate. A lot of the other students, other than maybe Tommy Hood and 1 or 2 others, wouldn't travel. Mm-hmm. And they really missed out a lot because not only the conversations in the car, but I had opportunity to meet so many wonderful people. And I'm going to tell a little story about you, if that's okay.
Uh-oh.
So we met in Virginia Beach, I think it was, at a seminar that Hanshi Abel was teaching. And I think we ended up partnering up or somehow worked together. And, I just had a blast meeting folks. And it was I think, Sport Kumite seminar he was teaching. And you were there. And I tell people, you never know when you go to these things, who you're going to meet and how that's going to change your life. And of course, here we are 40 years later, and we're doing this, but you've changed my life in many different ways.
Oh, wow.
And I've told this story before, I think at one of your camps, because of, first I showed up at your winter camp as a participant the first couple of times, had a great time. I remember I was just getting over a broken leg, so it was a little tricky that first time. But, then later becoming an instructor at that camp. But from your camp, I met a lot of people. I remember meeting Jay King, who later I started teaching in his school. I met Clint Green, and Clint later brought me into his seminars. And from that experience, I met great people like Sam Atai, Steve Curley, tons of other people, Pat Haley, where I've taught it now seminars with them. So, going to that one seminar years ago, meeting you, building relationship, you having me come in, I met people at your event, they had me come in, I met other people. So I tell people my entire career I can trace it back to traveling with Mr. Abel, because the opportunities to meet people, and then when you showed up with him, it was like you were almost a superstar. It's like, oh, you're with the guy.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Quick story. I remember going down to the U.S. Open, like way back in the early '80s, probably. And I showed up with Mr. Abel, and I think Bill Wallace was teaching a seminar down there. And it was a huge group of people, and Mr. Abel walks in the room, and immediately Bill Wallace stops the whole seminar, introduces Mr. Abel, goes over there, shakes his hand, carries, they're having this great conversation. Everybody's like, who's that guy? Who's that guy? And I'm standing next to Mr. Abel going, yep, that's right. I'm with the man. So,
I'm with him.
I was probably, I don't know, maybe a green belt or something, but it was a huge kind of deal to see when he walked in the room, the reaction that you got. And of course,
you knew him as your instructor, and he was just your instructor. But when you saw how respected he was in the whole martial arts community, that put it in a whole new light,
Oh, without a doubt. And I tell people, thinking about all the doors that I could have walked through,
right.
And that I ended up where I did, there was some, I think, divine intervention there on that. So,
yeah,
for sure.
For sure, yeah. I know the feeling. I had, of course, the opportunity to train with Shogo Kuniba for many years, and what was the chances of him moving to the United States, to my area, to my city? I mean, you got to think there's something that just brought everything together so that could happen. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. Now you've had. And by the way, I remember that seminar that we met at, because I think we did 1,000 push-ups. Okay.
Yes.
And I was not a fan of push-ups after that. Well, after I got over that, I was very much a fan of it, and so
that's where you
got it from him.
I was going to say, you learned the timer
yes.
theory, right?
That's right.
Using the little timer, every 10 minutes we stopped and did an exercise.
Yeah. And a lot of them were push-ups.
When he would bring the timers, I would try to hide them because I knew what was going to happen. It's like, I know what's about to happen.
Yeah, right. It's what my students do nowadays. Good grief. I don't know where they got that from. But anyway, now you've been very fortunate that you have, of course, had that training, but you've also trained in a lot of other things. I mean, you've trained in jujitsu, you've trained in, just a numerous number of arts, and you've been very fortunate to have had the opportunity to travel and train in China under some very knowledgeable sifu there. What was that like? That was had to be amazing.
Well, to go back a little bit, the idea of training in multiple arts, that was Mr. Abel's kind of idea. He asked me to do that. And I tell people, this is a true story. Advanced class one night, Mr. Abel says, okay, I'm going to put a challenge out to anybody in the class. Who wants to go learn jujitsu? Who wants to go learn some Chinese martial arts? And, I'm looking down the line and no one steps forward, so I do. And he said, okay, great. He was like, well, next week we're going to Florida. I'm going to introduce you to Steve Wrench. So, we drive down to Florida. We go down to see, I think, Mr. Chivas at the time. He was in the hospital. And then we went over and I met Steve Wrench, or Hanshi Ridgely. And he said, this is the guy that I would go to for jiu-jitsu training. And so he introduced us. He set up an opportunity for me to start going down there. So for many years, I would travel to Florida quite a bit. Spend a week down there, every other month or something. I don't remember what it was. And then go to all the camps and start learning jiu-jitsu. He said the only caveat, in a sense, is what you learn, you have to come back and you have to teach it at the school. So that was kind of the beginning of me training other arts. And it didn't take away necessarily from my karate or my kabuto training. It was, we set up a separate time frame. So whatever I was learning, I would have a chance to practice and also teach, along with all the karate training. Through that, in our style of karate, it's heavily influenced by Xingyi and some Bagua. So Mr. Abel said, I really think you should seek out a Xingyi or Bagua teacher. And I had the opportunity to go and train some Bagwajang with like Bonham Park, and then later with Paul Coty and a few others. And of course, part of that was I eventually, I would say, sought out Dr. Yang Guangming, which Mr. Abel admired him greatly, had all his books, would always recommend, here, read this book. So I know Dr. Yang was teaching in Memphis, Tennessee, and the guy hosting was someone that I had met at a Wing Chun seminar. And so he invited me to come out, and went out there. It was a long drive, but we went out, and I remember that night he was doing some Tai Chi applications, and I had no clue. I hadn't done any Tai Chi, any of that. But the guy Milo, who was sponsoring the seminar, said, well, Dr. Yang really needs someone that can take a fall. And everybody's like, nobody wanted to step forward. And I'm like, well, okay, I've been doing jiu-jitsu training. I can take a fall. So I volunteered to be Dr. Yang's uke for the whole weekend, which turned out to be one of the best things I ever did. Mm-hmm. Not only, he easily took me down, threw me around, never felt in danger, never felt like he was going to hurt me, but I had no choice to fall. When he touched me, you went.
Yeah, right.
He was just, he was that skilled. But I had a great time. We developed a nice relationship from that. Luckily, going back to what you were talking about in China, when I got married, my wife's, she's Chinese, born in Vietnam, and she wanted to go to Southeast Asia and China on our honeymoon. So it was about a 5-week honeymoon. And we went to places like Hong Kong, all over Southeast Asia. And while I was there, I was fortunate enough to go to the park in Kowloon, which is the other side of the island of Hong Kong. And there's just tons of martial arts going on. And the cool thing is, you can sit and watch, or you can walk up and introduce yourself. And a lot of the Sifu will, go, hey, well, join us, come in and train. So I had an opportunity just to walk up and go, hey, I'd really like to train with you guys.
Wow.
And that kind of started how that went. And, on that trip, I got to see some Silat and some other things when we were in Indonesia. About 2 years later, we went back to mainland China. And I was able to, on several occasions, set up some training. There was a cruise down the Yangtze River that we went on for about a week, and they had a Tai Chi teacher there. And we started talking, and so every morning we would go and work Tai Chi in the mornings. And then when I got to Shanghai, you can go to, they have this big sports complex in Shanghai, and there's all kinds of stuff going on there. So just like I did in Kowloon, I just went over there, and I actually started training on my own, and then you'd have people walk up to you and ask you questions, or other teachers, would see what you're doing and come over and say something, and then you can join in different groups. So a lot of it was just kind of, by accident. You go, put yourself out, you introduce yourself, and you don't always know what you're going to get, but sometimes
you're right. That's fascinating.
You're fortunate to to do that, and part of it is just stepping out. Get out of your comfort zone, and Hanshi Ridgely always said, empty your cup, have a beginner's mind.
Right.
And if you do that, you never know what you're going to get. You're always cautious, but at the same time, if you just put your hand out there and say, hey, I'd really like to train with you guys or learn this. And that's how a lot of that, when you develop those relationships. So I met a lot of folks on those trips. I even had an opportunity to do a demonstration for a Chinese audience. They were like, wow. Oh, well, really, so it was kind of cool. It's like, okay, here's this American guy. He's going to show us his martial arts from the U.S. And it was pretty cool because I got a chance to demonstrate some of, what we do to like I said, a group of, it was actually some other foreign tourists, but also to the Chinese people there. And so that was kind of a blast. And,
absolutely. What an honor, too.
But I tell people it was, there again, Hanshi Abel, he asked me to go and learn other things. The great thing about him is when you're a secure teacher, you're not afraid for your students to learn other things because you see the value of them learning and expanding their knowledge. And because of who he was, he wanted his students to be better. He truly believed the Shuhari concept, and he would always say, learning from tradition to transcend, to become better. And he had a rough translation, which got him in trouble sometimes. He would always say, I want my students to train with the intent of being better than their instructor.
There you go.
And and there were a lot of instructors that didn't like to hear that. They were like, why would you want your people to be better than you? And Mr. Ray would always say, well, wait a minute, do you want your kids to be worse off than you are?
Right.
And he said, it's the same concept. I want the next generation to go further and to do more than I was able to do. So he gave us those opportunities. And another thing about the kind of man he was is, when I was younger, I didn't make a lot of money, didn't always have, expenses to go to these places. There were times that he would pay for me to go to seminars.
Wow.
He would go, this guy's in town, Fumio Toyota, Aikido guy, was going to be in Charlotte. And he's like, you need to go see this guy. I think what he does is valuable. Here's the money. Go do it.
Wow.
And I mean, it was just amazing that that's the kind of commitment he made to his people. So.
And he saw the talent and the desire in you to do that, because I'm sure he didn't do that for all his students.
Well, true. And it was there again, when he made the challenge, he was willing to help whoever would step forward. And, I was fortunate enough. I think I was just dumb enough to go, okay, I'll do it. And then, it's scary in the beginning, right?
Right.
And like he'd always say, everything's difficult in the beginning. And as you do it, it becomes easier and easier. So over time, it was like, of course, why would I not want to go and learn something new? And even today, if I can have an opportunity to see something new, I get excited.
Yeah.
It gives me inspiration. Immediately, I can see something that I didn't see before in my own art. And that's the beauty about learning other things. It expands your knowledge, I think, of your own art, of your mother art, so to speak.
Absolutely. And we had the same kind of experiences, because Shogo Kuniba is kind of the same way. He'd invite other sensei, and you thought, well, I've got the best sensei in the world, so why do we need these other guys? But he'd bring in guys that were, like you said, Aikido or other styles of Kobudo or even Karate, and have them teach at his seminars and stuff. And we became better because we got to understand our own art better by seeing what these arts did, And
it's exactly how I was going to say. Your teacher inspired me greatly. I remember being, I think, a brown belt, and I went to a tournament. Actually, I think you were there. I remember, but that's probably the first time we met, even though we didn't know it. But I remember seeing some videotape of him from a seminar he did in South Carolina, and I was just amazed at the Goshindo that he was teaching. It seemed so effortless, and I was like, I want that. Here, I'm a little dude. He's not using any power, and he's dumping these guys with no force whatsoever, with no effort. And I went, I was inspired. And to this day, a lot of those techniques that I was able to see him do or learn, I still utilize greatly today. So that he made a huge difference in my life. And it's kind of interesting. You meet the teacher, and then you become very good friends with the student. There's others like Jim Logue, which is another amazing man who's unfortunately not with us. One of his students, Alex Ramaza, now we're very good friends and do a lot of things together. So it's interesting because Mr. Abel and Jim Logue were really close, and Jim would come over to the dojo all the time and work with Mr. Abel, and they would go back and forth. And there's techniques that I would go, I'm not sure if that was something that came from Mr. Abel or Mr. Logue, but it really didn't matter.
Right.
Because once they got together, they could see something and each gleam a principle out of it, and then, of course, pass it on. So, it's nice that, your teacher inspired me, and now we're doing things together. Jim Logue inspired me, and now I'm doing things with one of his students, Alex Ramaza. So it's amazing how, from one generation to the next, people that you gained from, the senior teacher, and now you're with the student, so to speak.
Right, absolutely. And your teacher inspired me tremendously. You inspire me tremendously every time we get together. My instructor, by the way, Shogo Kuniba, yesterday was the 29th anniversary of his passing, unfortunately. A day which I try not to remember because it's not my favorite time to remember him, but right. I can't believe it's been 29 years since he left us. But that was a great loss. Anyway, now your unique style that has formed, that I guess you formed or has formed around you, has combined a lot of different arts, of course, as you've been talking about, and especially from the Okinawan and from the Chinese. And they use chi or ki, the internal energy, a little bit in different ways. How do you see them? How does it you see it used and taught differently between those cultures?
Well, first, let me go back a little bit. I tell people, I've been fortunate to train many different things, but I have my root art, which is the Shuri-Ryu Karate that I learned from Mr. Abel. And so I kind of always see things through that lens, in a sense. The other arts just help me enhance, I think, what was already there, or see more or deeper
That's
what
a
was
great way
already
of
there.
putting it. I got to say, it's a great way through the
And
lens. I like that.
so you know, for example, like I was saying earlier, like they always say there's a lot of Xingyi and Bagua within the Shuri-Ryu. So going and learning, those arts helped me to see where it was within our art. And you're talking about the components of chi. Um, I think in the East, you know, the concept of chi or ki, it's cultural. It's in everything. People come up that way, understanding that this energy exists. Where in the West, we're very skeptical. We want to prove it scientifically. So we have kind of a different view. We're looking at maybe the physics of it, which is not a negative thing, because Dr. Yang has gone through tremendous lengths to be able to prove the concepts of chi through the Western view of physics. And he's done a great job in a lot of his books. But I think, you know, you can think of chi in the different arts. For example, you have hard and soft. So some of the more harder arts, kung fu, we look at the concept of, we say external to internal, meaning that they develop their external technique to ultimately find that understanding of how the body connects to the internal, how you express your chi then. So you start from the external, go to the internal, where maybe some of the softer arts like Tai Chi Chuan, it's more developing the inside first and then expressing it externally. So the concept of internal to external. But you want to ultimately get to the same place where, every movement should be supported by chi. So the concept of like Xing Yin Chuan is, everything you do, the mind forms the thought. And then when the mind forms the thought, it recruits or energizes the chi to basically perform that movement, which is the idea of li, or physical expression of chi. So we always say li chi, yi, the mind, chi, li. So the mind animates the chi, basically, then it expresses it through the physical body. So, that's kind of a very, say, Eastern concept of martial arts, that you don't just throw stuff out. You're not just, doing technique. Everything's very deliberate, and it's coming from a very conscious thought. The idea of, how to say, if I have a strong mind, I have a strong body, right? So they're not independent of each other. You look at, I don't want to get too weird, but for example, maybe the Eastern view of mental disorders. A lot of times they go, the problem is that the mind and body are not connected. Meaning, if the spirit is weak, probably the mind is weak, or vice versa. So if you have a strong concentrated mind or a strong spirit, they're not independent of each other. They're connected. So the stronger your thought, the stronger it animates that chi, which then supports the physical body. So to me, part of my training is a lot of qigong, and not only for health but also for my martial prowess. So I can't. It's hard to separate the two now. It's not just a physical exercise anymore. Every movement. I think of, for example, for me, kata is a qigong exercise. When
Wow.
you start to look at some of the postures, I mean, even your hikite, pulling your hand back, Mr. Abel was always big on, really rotating your hand and your hikite and your pullback so that the thumb is higher than the pinky. And people go, why? Why is that so important? But when you do that, you can feel a contraction all the way up your arm to your shoulder. When you start to create this relaxation, contraction, you're actually developing the ligament tendon. You're getting chi to circulate strongly in your joints. So not only is it healthy, but then it energizes your joints. So when you really want to express your power, you're building that reservoir of chi, so to speak, within your joints, and then you can release it when you strike. So that's why I said every movement in kata, I can look at it from a qigong aspect as well as a martial aspect. So I don't know if that kind of answers your
No,
question.
that's fascinating the way you explain that. And uh, I, I think back now to some of the things I got from Hanshi Abel as well. And like you said, turning that fist to the point where that pinky is higher. I teach that all the time. And it is what makes sense as far as the energy, the kinetic energy being built up so you can explode, and the technique can just take off. Fascinating, fascinating thoughts there. Now, after your teacher's passing, you really took a different path from what most advanced martial artists usually do. They usually go out and they open a dojo. Instead, you embarked on a career as a seminar instructor. So, and that was a kind of a tricky thing to probably, take a chance on. What made you want to take that path and take that chance to be successful on the seminar circuit?
Well, first of all, short answer, low overhead.
So true. I understand that.
So, somewhat joking, but that had something to do with it.
Sure.
My
So,
wife decided one day she was going to move back to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We were living in Columbia, and so she walks in and she says, "I'm moving," and that was it. And I'm like, "Am I welcome to go?" And of course, she said, "Yes, you can." I said, "Well, that means I'm going to have to quit my job." And she said, "That's fine. Just go do martial arts full time." And I'm like, wow. See, she's smart. She knew
yeah.
that would get me to move. So,
That was brilliant.
so, I'd been working for the state of South Carolina 21 years, and it was okay. But, I was ready for something else, and she knew it. So she put that challenge out. So it was interesting. We moved, and, we looked around. I thought about doing the dojo thing. And I was already doing some seminars. I was already teaching, at several dojos, in North and South Carolina, where I'd go once a month or twice a month. So I just kind of continued to do that. And I said, well, let me try to expand this, because I already had somewhat of a network of folks that I knew. And the wife just said, she's so funny. She said, well, try it for a year. And if you're able to make it work, then you don't have to get a job. But if you can't make it work, you're going back to work. So I was a little motivated. So I got on the phone, started talking to people, and was able to, fortunate enough to set up enough seminars and teachings at schools. And that's kind of what I've been able to do now is I go to 8 or 9 schools once a month, in North, South Carolina, and Georgia. And, that I wouldn't say I make a lot of money, but I love what I do. And to me, that's more important.
Absolutely.
So that kind of how that started. My other thought was through the seminars and the multiple dojos, I could reach more people than just the hometown dojo, in the sense that I could spread Mr. Abel's teachings to a wider audience. And from that, of course, now that's what started to develop the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai, was making those connections, having long distance students all around the country now. And that's kind of was the beginning of developing that whole process. So, there's still times I would really like to have a dojo. And, if I could get Steve Curley from California to move here and open a dojo with me, we joke about that because he's really good with kids. Me, not so much. But
and you got to teach kids these days.
But he would be a great partner to do something like that with. And I still think about it. It's still in the back of my mind. Maybe as I get older, I'm starting to get a little tired traveling, but so it's still out there. But I enjoy meeting and being around a lot of different people, and of course, because of that, I've been able to travel, all over. So.
Oh yeah, your opportunities you've gotten are tremendous, and you formed the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai kind of as an offshoot from the big International Shuri-Ryu Association, and it's become very successful and grown into a very prominent association for yourself. Um, I guess you would call it kind of an eclectic group since it teaches your styles of Budo, but also encompasses many other styles. So, how do you get so many people from so many varied backgrounds, associations, etc., to work together so well?
And that's that's interesting.
Yeah,
As you know, maybe many years ago, back in the day, it was almost unheard of, right? To
right.
mix with other styles. It's one thing to go to maybe a Shotokan school goes to a Shitaru school. Okay, that might be okay, but to do a completely different type of training, that was somewhat frowned upon. Of course, therein it goes back to Mr. Abel's vision of he did that for the symposiums, right? You remember how
Right.
he would bring people from many different arts, and it was a little strange at first, but then people saw the value of meeting and training in these other arts. So for me, it was more like just continuing what my teacher had started. And I tell people, and I'll get to your exact question in a minute, but I have to credit Hanshi Abel again, because the SBK, the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai, would not exist if it wasn't for him pushing me to form it. And I tell people this. A lot of folks don't know. For 2 years he had asked me, you need to distinguish your own Yudansha. Because we had his group, the Shuri-Te Yudanshikai, which was Mr. Abel's Yudansha, his organization. But he said, look, you need to basically make clear, who's your Yudansha, who are training with you. He said, I would, I want you to form your own, kind of subgroup, so to speak, or an offshoot of his group. So that's kind of how it started. And for 2 years, I kept saying, no, I'm one of your guys. I'm part of your group. I don't need to do that. He kept pushing me. And I think, that was back when he was dealing with his illness.
Right.
And he saw into the future.
Yeah.
I think
I
wanted me
that.
to,
Yeah.
he wanted me to be able to look after myself, once he was no longer there. So he saw that establish your own Kai, build that. Then when I'm no longer here, it's not like you're starting over. You already have something in place. So part of that was him asking me to do it, and reluctantly I did. Now, to get back to your question, bringing people together, one, it was, I would say, challenging, but at the same time it was easy, because I just followed Mr. Abel. His view was mutual respect. It didn't matter if you did this style or that style, that martial arts. He respected you, and he thought everyone had value. Every art has some value to it, and if you just get over yourself and watch what they do, talk with them, spend time with them, you'll go, wow, that's pretty special. I really like that. That's a lot like something I do here. Can you tell me more about that? And then something that you may have difficult with for years, or I don't really understand what this move's all about. Immediately you see someone else do it and you see purpose. So for me, it's, other people can give me purpose for what I do, just by listening and being humble and watching. So the more I can bring people in and go, you have something valuable. I want you to share what you have with my people. And everybody wants to feel that, right? Everybody wants to think that what they do is valuable, and they want to share it with people if you ask them. So for me, it was just having that mindset of, come in, help us. It's always, I want your help. You see what I mean? It's not, well, watch what I can do for you. No, it's, how can you help me? And I think ultimately people want to help people. And if you respect them and you show that you truly respect them by your actions, not just your words, that's one way to kind of bridge the gap. And we kind of have a little bit of a joke that it's almost a requirement or a prerequisite that if you're a member of the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai, you have to be a member of another organization or train multiple arts. we encourage, we
Wow.
encourage it.
What a
Because I've
concept.
had people go, Well, it is weird because I've had people go, well, if I join your group, does that mean I have to like resign from this other group?
Right.
And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
If that group wants to help me, that's great.
Yeah. But that's what a lot of other groups do is they say, if you join us, you can't be a member of something else. And you're totally the opposite. And that's fascinating.
Well, see, for me, I think that's an insecurity.
Right. Absolutely.
Instead of us all trying to grow together, instead of, well, this is all we have and I don't want you to see anything else. That's very short-sighted. Why not try to be the best you can be? Hanshi Ridgely, you remember this, he would have a little saying, good, better, best, right?
Yeah.
And he said, that's good, but this is better, but we really want to become the best. And it's the same with, everything I do. If I just kind of limit who I have in and what you can do in the Kai, it would still be good.
Yeah.
But it could be better.
Mm-hmm.
By opening up to other people, other ideas. But ultimately, I want it to be the best it can possibly be.
Right.
Right. So having this mindset of, Mr. Abel, also another saying, he would say, we're in the abundance theory, right? And the more is better, right? In the sense that, see if I can describe it. He didn't want to take away from, he wanted to add to, right?
Right.
So, that concept of you have something valuable, bring it in, then we're all going to benefit because we're in that abundance theory. There's enough credit, right, to go around.
Yeah.
It's not just about me or, or one or two people. It's about everybody. Yeah. And if we live in that abundance theory, then there's always enough knowledge, credit for everybody. So, to me, that's kind of the concept of that. And then the other, make this short, but you remember Hanshi Abel's guiding principles, which are now the guiding principles for the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai. And it's principle over personality.
Right.
And that's the biggie.
Yeah.
And once people understand that, we might not always agree. We might see things differently. Like when you do your art, you like this, I might do this. But we're seeking a principle. We can all come together on that. So if we're able to put our egos, our personalities aside and seek the betterment of our training and our students, seek that principle. Then the other is cooperation. Of course, if you can put the principle above the personality, then you can cooperate, right? So the first is important because you can't cooperate unless you do the first. Once we start to cooperate, then the value of continued study, right? Because we're cooperating, then we can train together. We're, continuing our study, which is going to make whatever we do better, going to give us a deeper understanding. And then, for me, ultimately, it's then if I can do that, then I'm seeking the perfection of myself and the people around me, right? So, Hanshi Ridgely, tell people 99% of probably what I do, teach, and say are his words, his lessons. And, they were, how to say, there's no need to, he had he had the right answer.
Right. So, no need to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. So that's kind of how a lot of that came together and how we're able to kind of have people see the vision of, following those principles so we can all get better. So
if I can say, your teacher would be so proud of you now. What you've done, what you've become, what you've put together, he would be he'd be amazed and he'd be very, very proud. And I'm just saying that off script because
well,
that's what I feel in my heart. I really do.
I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's kind of I want to be able to look back and go, would Mr. Abel have been
Absolutely.
proud of what I did?
No doubt.
So, when I start to, when my mind wanders in places, so to speak, we always have that funny little saying about what would Mr. Abel think?
Yeah.
What would Mr. Abel do?
Right.
So when temptation of, whatever comes in, I just go, what would Mr. Abel think of that?
Right.
What would Mr. Abel do? And, so it's an interesting perspective. Would he be proud of that? And that it's a nice way to kind of guide you to more of a righteous way of looking at, I think, life in the world. So just
Yep. Yep. I remember him saying, if you have to think about something, whether it's right or wrong, then it's probably wrong. So now
wrong.
you're saying, if I have to think about, what would Mr. Abel think, then okay,
The
I can
answer's
make the
already
right
there.
decision. The answer's right there.
Just a real quick thing on that. One of Mr. Abel's other senior black belts, and I won't say his name. He called me a while back, and he was struggling with some issues with organizational things, not our organization. And he was being asked to maybe do some things that he knew was probably not the right thing to do. But in order to kind of keep his position, he was being asked to do things that he thought was unfair to someone else. And he just said, what's your opinion on this? And I just said exactly that. I said, well, what do you think Mr. Abel would do? And he said, yep, you don't need to say any more.
Yeah.
And he made the right decision. And his life is different now because of that. But, he
Good.
just, so it was an interesting perspective that, once we put that in front of him, he knew exactly what the right thing to do was.
Right,
So.
right. Wow. We have a short video clip, by the way, from one of our seminars. We'll roll that from one of your seminars, I should say.
Uh-oh.
It came off of Facebook. It's a little jumpy, but it just shows people working together and some of the interesting things. This was actually, I believe, a weapons seminar that we did years ago, that you did a few years back.
Uh-oh.
And we're waiting for that to roll. There it goes. Oh yeah, Mr. Martinez. Yeah, that was a great seminar.
Oh, I remember that.
Got an AK. There's Paul Cote. Clearing a room. Look out.
That's it.
And you had
there's the guy.
You had the new and the traditional. You had quite a varied number of things that were taught. Kevin Kagianis, one of my good friends, great guy, great instructor. Yeah, and
Rick Fike. Oh,
Mr.
yeah.
Fike, boy, he was fascinating. We got to get him back.
Yep, that's one of my plans.
Yeah.
Hopefully next year.
Good. Yeah, good stuff. Now, you've been able to reach, like we were just talking about, reach across political and organizational, boundaries and all these to all these different people and organizations. What would you hope to see happen between people and organizations now in the future?
Well, I would say, I want everyone to be successful, and that goes back to that abundance theory. So, if we can just try to work together again, like I said, it's going to be good for everybody. And the clip you show was a great example of, people from many different backgrounds,
Right.
Whether it be a more modern sense of martial art, where they were doing handgun and, military training, to traditional kabuto, to iaido, to Rick Fike doing knife throwing, to, because everybody had something valuable in that mix. And it was nice because you saw everybody training with everybody. People don't, and that's the great thing I tell people about our seminars and our instructors. You go to certain big clinics and, the teacher's teaching, but he doesn't go and train in someone else's class.
Right.
Where in our group, it's fun. It's difficult because I was working on the schedule for the conference coming up. And it's difficult for me to do the schedule because so many of the instructors say, I want to train with other instructors. So I always have to take it into consideration. I can't schedule them at the same time because I know they want to train with this guy.
Exactly.
So that's the beauty of, I think, the people around me, that they want to get better, even though they're very senior instructors, but they're still training and developing, and they see the value of training with other people, and they're the first to jump in someone else's class.
And I think you inspire that, greatly, because you do the same thing.
Well, because like I said, over the years, that's put me, we have a little saying. I say, I'll show you everything I know now, because hopefully next year I'll know so much more.
There you go.
And I got that concept a lot from Dr. Yang Gui Ming. He says, I give you everything now, because next year it's going to be different. I'm going to know more than I knew before.
Right.
And, because that's my idea. I have a whole year to learn some new stuff. Mm-hmm. So whatever I'm doing now, you can have it all. Mr. Abel always said, it's not yours until you give it away.
Oh, wow.
And I truly believe that every time I figure something out, or I discover something, or one of his lessons that I wish I had listened to him years ago, and I was stubborn, but all of a sudden it popped back in my head and I went, oh, that's what he was talking about. Why was I so stubborn back then? Now I understand. I'll immediately want to show someone. One, because it helps me put it inside. It makes me internalize it. But then it opens up for me to learn something else, because I'm not holding on to it, right? It doesn't become stagnant. So part of that is my belief that, with bringing all these different people together, that it's going to be better for the martial arts community as a whole. I want people to look at what we do as they see the value in it. And if we have a strong community of martial artists, people will see the value. And I think, other sports get a lot of credit for this and that, but and that's good, and there are nice lessons in other sports, but we're not just a sport.
Right.
It's a life course, so to speak, or it's a lifestyle. And there's so much more benefits to what we do. So if I can help to elevate the view of the martial arts, regardless of the style, then we're all better off, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the goal for, the organization and bringing folks together. And that's kind of my hope. And that was Mr. Abel's, he always said it. He said, other schools are not our competition. It's gyms, or it's a, sports league. And
right.
He said he would go out of his way to help other dojos. He said, because I don't want them to be less than, how do I say, he wants to elevate them, because if they're a good school, then they represent us all, right?
Right.
We don't want a weak link. So if everyone has a good representation of what martial arts is, we all look good. So exactly. It's not about tearing someone down. It's about building everyone up, right? So that was really his belief. And I don't know if you remember when he would do his qualifier, his tournaments in Colombia, the night before he would have what we call martial arts night. And he would invite schools, 8 or 9 schools, to come in and do demonstrations. Now, who does that? Goes, I want my competition, in a sense, from my own town to come in, set up a booth, put out your literature, right? Whatever you have about your school, put it on a table, do a demonstration, promote what you do. And he would, invite, of course, the public. We had huge amounts of people who would come to the gym and watch this. And he was so proud to have all of these different schools there represent. And he showed everyone tremendous respect, because there again, it was about building us all up, not tearing anyone down.
Right.
And and it was funny because some schools just didn't get the vision. He would walk in and say, "This is what I want to do," and they would be suspicious, and they go, "No, we don't want to participate. There's got to be something, And he's like, "No, really, come and bring your stuff, do your demo." And we had some great demonstrations. I met some really good people. Randy Henderson, I met at one of those events, and he's now trains with me, as well as I teach at his school, and that's been a great relationship. It's one of the places I go on a monthly basis. I was actually there on Tuesday at his place, and there again, if he hadn't showed up, because he came and did a demo, we met at that event, and there again, changed his life, changed my life.
Yeah.
Just by showing up. So.
My fiance Donna, who you know well, she is extremely connected in the business world and all, and she's on all kinds of boards and just really making a difference in the community. And that's her mantra, so to speak, is she says, in order for you to be part of this and that and the other, you just got to show up. You got to show up. You got to be there, And it's so true. You can't say, "Oh, I'm not going to go. I'll do it next time," or whatever. you gotta go. You gotta show up and be there, and you never know what's going to happen. If I hadn't gone to that seminar in, I think it was 1990, 91 or whatever, where we met, if I hadn't gone, we wouldn't be doing this today, and
Exactly.
who knows,
And you know,
all the things I would have lost and opportunities I would have lost because of that. So you got to show up. That's good.
well,
Now,
it's interesting because real quick on that, another saying I got from Tom Ryan: "Those that come get, right?
right. Like
Show
that.
up.
Yep.
You know, those that come get." It's so simple.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And like we say about, getting your black belt, you just got to keep coming in the door, just keep coming in the door. Now, of course, this past year's been a challenging year like no other we've ever been through before. And in the martial arts community, the industry, so to speak, they're telling us that like over 7,000 dojo have gone out of business. And I know your events, your conference last year was canceled, and a lot of your seminars. How have you survived through the past year?
I wouldn't say it was easy.
No. I think I've worked harder than ever before.
It isn't that the truth. I can truthfully say I'm blessed because I have a lot of great people within our group, within the Kai. And to me, they're not just members; they're friends, right?
Right.
And I had a lot of folks in the Kai, friends that helped me, in many different ways. Whether they help financially, whether they help by putting together some small groups to where we could train, with mask or whatever, 3 or 4 people, just in a more of a safe environment. So that really helped get me through, some of the tougher times. I mean, there was the first, I guess, 4 months I did nothing,
Right.
As far as, teaching. Now, personally, I did training here at home. I kind of took the time to analyze, some things that I was doing. And I started working on this Qigong set, this coiling set, that has kind of opened my eyes. And I can't wait for the conference to be able to share this with the rest of the group. I've been doing little pieces of it now that I'm able to train again, and it's improved my art tremendously. So, that 4 or 5 months, every day working on this little Qigong set, when I say little, it's actually pretty long, but it has changed the way I move now. So it was a lot of self-analyzing, things that I had been doing for years, but I put it together, in a kind of a continuous set. And it's been beneficial. So I always try to find that silver lining. In a sense, I think if I didn't have that downtime, I would maybe not have spent the time to do this. Mm-hmm. So it was almost worth, not working, not right. having an income for a few months, right. to be able to develop this kind of set. So from help from members and luckily a little bit of online sales, I was able to sell some videos and books. People couldn't train, so they were like, okay, I can sit at home and watch this video or read this book.
Right.
So thank goodness for that, for that little bit of sales that I was able to do. And,
you have done a lot of videos. I mean, you put together, I think you kind of started with Hanshi Abele, and you started putting out some DVDs of the conferences and the symposiums and mm-hmm. stuff. And now you have really expanded that, and you're doing videos for other people as well. How many videos do you have out there?
I need to count them, but I know rough estimate, 60 or 70 different videos that are available. Wow. Not just me, but other folks. But quick story on that. My first, I guess you say, official video was kind of interesting because I was going to be teaching in Denmark for Vitas Bilking. And, Vitas called me like 2 weeks before I was going to leave to go do the seminar. And he said, well, is there any way you can videotape what you're going to teach while you're here? And I'm like, yeah, Vita, sure. Got 2 weeks, no problem.
Oh, gee.
So luckily we had about a month earlier, we were already thinking about trying to really start doing more videotaping. So Annie bought her first professional level video camera, and it had, we still were trying to figure out how it worked, as you know. And actually we had the same camera for a while there.
That's right.
But so I went, okay, Annie, tonight we're going to the dojo. I'm going to teach class, and basically I'm going to teach for the next 3 hours the primary techniques and training that I want to do when I'm in Denmark. So she turned the camera on, one take, I just taught class.
Wow.
We never stopped the camera. I came back, a little bit of editing to take out some of the bad jokes, and and boom, it was like almost a 3-hour video. I had no idea how to render, how to do anything, how to edit. I mean, it was all new. I mean,
Right.
I sat there the first day just staring at the computer and the program going, okay, what do I do with this? And I mean, luckily, you can find out everything online now. This was
Right.
a
This
while
was way
back.
before
so,
that. Yes.
yeah.
Way before
So
YouTube. Yes.
it was trial and error. I'm like, well, what is this? When I do this, what happens when you do that? So it was self-taught kind of. I still think it's my best video today.
Of course, it's your
And,
first.
We named it was The Art of Combative Motion, and it came out. I was able to produce it. Like I said, it wasn't easy. Took about 50 copies with me to Denmark. Luckily, I sold them all.
Wow.
And it was like, I was excited when I got back. Okay, we can do this.
Yeah, there you go.
So this kind of started, that production. And I laugh. I go, it's almost like I was like Madonna for a while. It's like Annie had the camera. She would follow me around when I would do seminars and just videotape. And it's funny because I still find footage that we took 15 or 20 years ago, and that I never put out. And I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Let me edit that and put something together. So it's kind of nice that, and this was something Mr. Abel wanted to do, because he really wanted to be able to document what he taught.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to document some of it, but not as much as I would have liked.
Right.
So I go, I'm not going to lose this opportunity. So if I have the ability to do it, and Annie's willing to film, that's kind of happened. So now every time we can pull the camera out, we do it. So.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Yeah, because we didn't have that opportunity back years ago, It was the Super 8mm film.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I remember those days. So you've done a lot, but of course you've got years left. You've got a long time, a great career ahead of you. But what do you feel has been your greatest accomplishment in your career so far?
Ooh, I'm going to answer that several ways. And I know this sounds a little hokey, but hopefully it's true. I hope that I've made a positive difference in people's lives. I mean, that was Mr. Abel's thing. He said we have an awesome responsibility as a martial arts instructor. What we do or say, how we conduct ourselves, can make a big difference in people's lives. And and at first I'm kind of like, yeah, right, sure. But then ultimately, I see the difference Mr. Abel made in my life, and I go, well, can I continue his teachings? Can I make a difference in someone else's life? And hopefully that's the case. So to me, I would say, if I accomplished anything at all, that would be my hope, that I've helped people in some sort of meaningful way to, that put them on the right path, gave them a purpose, just impacted their lives through the, yes, the physical training, their health, but also their emotional well-being and everything that goes with that. The other would be, I'd say, probably forming the SBK, the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai. That organization gives back to me in so many ways, as far as, the friendship, fellowship, the training, learning from others, having that network of people that that are there for me, and I'm hopefully there for them. To me, it's just a huge thing to be able to put that together. So I think that would be considered for me, maybe one of the biggest accomplishments. And of course, we already talked about producing, DVDs and books. That was something there again, I thought I'd never be able to do. And then when the challenge came up, stepping up to the plate and doing it, and there again, it wasn't easy at first, but now it seems like it's a piece of cake, I guess, in a way. It got easier as time went on. The other was, continuing, I guess you could say, Mr. Abel's International Symposium, even though we call it the Shuri-Te Martial Arts Conference now. But it kind of continues in that same spirit of bringing different styles together, a good martial artist, and having that event. And luckily, it's expanding and getting larger each year. And a lot of good relationships, because I met so many great people at different events. My hope is that, yes, you'll come and learn something, but you'll meet someone. And that's what I tell everybody, try something different you haven't done before. Introduce yourself to someone you don't know.
Yes.
Because a lot of great friendships, and to me, the biggest compliment or biggest thrill after the conference is I'll see pictures on Facebook of people that met. And now they have this great relationship. And over the years, I'll see these same people that met at the conference now, become good friends and do things together. Invite another instructor to come and teach at their school that they met at the conference. That's truly what I want it to happen. It be a network of, opportunities for everybody, whether it be the student or the teacher. So to me, that's been a huge accomplishment. And then the ability to teach martial arts full time. Mm-hmm. To me, that's probably because if my wife wasn't smart enough to go, okay, quit your job, do this, give me the support to, and it wasn't easy for her either.
Right.
But she's in full support of that, and I tell people she's the one that keeps up with my schedule. She's like, aren't you supposed to be somewhere tonight? Aren't you going away for the weekend?
Right.
Instead of, I hear from other guys who go, well, my wife's upset I'm at the dojo 2 nights a week. And I'm like, would she rather you be at a bar somewhere?
Right, exactly.
Hanging out with people doing something constructive.
Right.
Where Annie, she gets it. She truly, and I tell people something that I learned from Mr. Abel, and it's probably one reason I'm married and still married today, is he said, find someone that's on your side.
There you go.
And my wife is definitely on my side.
Yeah.
As I'm on her side.
And
it's not a selfish thing. It's not what, she can get. It's what we can get together.
Yeah.
And she really gets that. And, I admire, I always say that I wanted to only do it one time.
There you go, right.
So that's probably why we dated 7 years. I wanted to be sure. But very supportive of that. So, but I would say that's probably, some of the accomplishments.
Yeah. You and Annie, you're such a great team, and you often speak of your wife, Annie, during instruction, and how you're scared of her. How scared?
Yes.
How scared are you of her?
Well, I don't want to say anything negative, but I definitely know not to cross her. Okay. and Annie, she's kind of my check. She's the check on me in a sense. She keeps me humble. I might be like, oh, I'm starting to feel really good about myself, and I'm, feeling a little spunky. She'll just look at me. She didn't have to say anything anymore. She just kind of gives me that look, and I'm like, okay. But it's good because
check. Got him under control. Check.
she does it from a positive sense.
Absolutely. Sure. She's a
great
lady.
She's wonderful, and there again, I wouldn't have been able to have those opportunities in China if it wasn't for her.
Right.
She's my translator because she speaks 5 languages, and I know it's crazy. So when we were in China, like, just talk to her, so because she can speak Cantonese and Mandarin,
wow,
as well as Vietnamese, and so she's just been a tremendous asset. There again, she's my photographer, my videographer,
and very good at it too.
Yes, she is. She has an amazing eye at seeing things that I don't see.
Right.
And then even watching Marshall, she'll watch someone's class and she'll have a perspective that I didn't see. She'll spot something that I'm like, oh my goodness, she's right. I didn't
Yeah.
see that. From that kind of novice eye, I guess you could
Right.
say.
All right.
She did train for a while, got her yellow belt, and then kind of moved on to other things. But so she kind of understands what we do, and she really. Real quick thing on that. I think third date, I took her to a tournament. That was our date.
That was your date?
It
Well, you
wasn't
were
Hilton
really
Head.
trying to impress, weren't you?
Well, it wasn't Hilton Head, South Carolina, so
Okay.
it wasn't like it was, So it was a nice weekend away, and
There you go.
I figured, okay, if she doesn't get this, then I'm going to move on. So,
So it was a
because this was
test?
in a way, it was like, okay, I want her to see what it is I do and what I'm about, because I did martial arts before we met, and I plan to do it if we continue.
Right.
So she had a great time, and
Good.
that's where she met a lot of the people that are her friends today, and so right away it was like, you passed the test. It was awesome.
I'll keep her. You're a keeper.
That's right.
Well, we talked about, it's interesting. We were talking about what your greatest accomplishment was. And again, I got to say, your teacher would be proud, because you didn't talk about, oh, I was on the U.S. team. Oh, I was, I got this trophy. Oh, I got this award or whatever. You're talking about sharing with others and how your organization, is helping people and all that stuff. And I mean, my sensei, our organization used to be called Seishin Kai, which meant pure heart. And
Heart.
you truly show a pure heart. And he would always look at a person and meet them for the first time, and right away he'd go, good heart. And you'd like, wow, okay, how do you find that out and so quick? And I'm sure he would be saying that about you too. So, but what do you think was your biggest failure, and what'd you learn from that?
That's interesting, because I don't like to think about failure.
Of course we don't. Yes, that's why I'm asking.
And when I say that, it's like failure is not really even a thought I hold on to.
Right.
To me, everything's an opportunity to learn a lesson. So there have been times that I had difficulty doing things, but I didn't think of it as a failure. It was just an opportunity to get better at something, or to try again, I guess you could say. So that's why it's kind of hard for me to even think of any kind of failure, because they were all just learning opportunities. So I know that doesn't really answer your question, but
No, I know what you mean.
So I can't really say there were any. I mean, there were hard times, but then again, those tend to be your biggest lessons. How you can achieve something.
Right.
The only thing I could say is there are people that I wish I had an opportunity to train with, and I was, I could have gone and I didn't. So for me, the biggest failures were missed opportunities, because either that person's no longer with us, or whatever they were doing would have been extremely valuable. So for me, there were those opportunities where I just couldn't go,
Right.
For whatever reason, or I chose not to, and I look back going, I should have done it, and I wish I had. So that would be my biggest failure, just certain folks that I wish I could have spent more time with.
Absolutely, sure. This is something that I'll say that probably a lot of people don't know is I failed my Shodan test in Iaido. Okay.
That reminds me.
I failed my Shodan test in Iaido. I did. I tripped on my Hakama. My sword got caught in the saya and everything. I mean, it was terrible, and I could have just thrown it away and said, "Forget it. I'm not doing this." And it just made me work harder. Just said, "Well, there's a challenge. Got to work harder," and I did. So
Well,
it is. You got to look at those things and just say, "I'm going to learn from this and keep going." So
it's funny. Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
It's funny you should say that, because it reminded me of something. My Sankyu exam, I failed. And this is very interesting, because I didn't know I was going to be testing that night. I showed up at the dojo. Vitas Bilking was in town from Denmark. Mr. Abel, I walk in, he said, you're testing and Vetus is going to test you. And I'm like, oh no. Because Vetus, as you know, was tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he took me off to the side and we started doing the physical part. And when I say physical, it was all the sit-ups and kicks. And we got about halfway through the physical part and he said, your exam's over. He said, you're not even going to get to the karate part. He said, you're not able to do what I'm asking you to do physically.
Wow.
And I'm like, I mean, it crushed me. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, I thought it was in good shape, but not to Vetus bilking standards. And there were, for a while there, I'm like, you know how it is. I'm like, Vetus, I was so upset with him. Of course, later we became the best of friends. And he made a lot of big things happen in my life. Spent a lot of time in Denmark with him and loved him to death. And of course, he passed away a few years ago. But it's funny how that motivated me. I'm like, this will never happen again, like you said.
Right.
And like I said, I got closer to Vetus because I later greatly respected, he's a man of principle. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I'm not going to, I don't care how good your karate stuff is. If you're not meeting all the standards that Hanshi Abel put forth, you're not going to squeak by. And that's the way it was. It wasn't, the good old boys club kind of thing, right? You either met the standard or you didn't. And that made a big impression in my life. And I got that from Vetus. And then, of course, I failed my my Shodan exam. We have a joke. I would say I was the Sankyu decade because I was a brown belt for like 6 years or something because I didn't want to test for my black belt. And Mr. Abel would always, every time a black belt exam came around, he'd say, you need to sign up, and I wouldn't. He'd say, you need to sign up, and I wouldn't. And finally, he told me, he said, if you don't show up for the next black belt exam, don't show up anymore. And I knew he was serious.
Wow.
So I showed up, and I went through all the physical stuff, went through all the karate stuff. At the very end, I was in my third kumite match, and I was so dehydrated, I hit the floor. Both my legs cramped up to the point where they almost took me to the hospital because they couldn't get the cramps to let go.
Oh, wow.
And, I did everything except the last match. And finally, after being in a hot shower, my legs, finally loosened up, I could hobble out on the floor. They failed me.
Wow. That's tough.
So, it was like, nope, you're coming back in 3 months and you're going to do it all over again. And I did. and that was quite of a challenge. They brought in like a kickboxer guy to do my last match with. And he split my eye open, but I knocked the wind out of him and knocked him down. We both went down. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
It was very interesting, but I had to go to the hospital, get stitched up, and then I came back and they passed me. But so those failures became great successes. So
that's great. People are asking me, why are you doing this black belt life thing? Because I love these stories. They're so good.
And it's funny because those are things I wanted to forget.
Yeah, of course, right.
Until you brought it up.
See, I'm bringing them out. There we go. So see, the people who are still listening now, they're like going, wow, I didn't know that. That's cool. Now, besides Hanshi Abel, who do you think were like 3 people who really were very influential to you, in your martial arts?
Well, it's a long list, so
I'm going
to name more than 3. Some of them we've already spoke of. Dr. Yang Dui Ming changed the way I look at my art. I did Tai Chi, Chin Na, Qigong, some white crane with him, and it really brought into focus a lot of things that we were doing that I just didn't realize were there. Brought that internal component. Steve Wrench, of course, my first jiu-jitsu teacher, put me on that path. And really the idea of the jiu-jitsu training was to understand our bunkai better. Mm-hmm. The thing is, you have all these movements, but if you don't understand maybe the technique part of it,
right,
you can't always see what could be there. And there's a gentleman that I learned something from. He said, he'd ask the question, what came first, the technique or the bunkai? Let me rephrase that. He said the kata or the bunkai.
Right.
So he'd say, was it the kata and then the bunkai, or was it the bunkai and then the kata? And he says it was the technique or the bunkai. So the way that the kata came about was a way to remember these complex techniques or bunkai. So you would have a sailing move from that particular technique that would remind you, oh, this is what I'm doing. So you have to fill in the blanks a lot of times,
Right.
So if you don't have an understanding of what you can do with motion, then it's meaningless. And I have to say, Mr. Wrench helped me with that. Mr. Abel was extremely good at that himself, but Wrench gave me a different perspective. And then, of course, Jim Logue, it was a very different, his efficiency of motion. I was so impressed how he could hardly move and drop people. And I go, as a little guy with not a lot of physical strength, I want to have that subtlety that when I hit you or lock you, you're going to drop. And Mr. Logue had that ability. So those three, I'd say, are kind of some of the top ones. Others, if I could just throw some names out, Carl Wilcox. I learned so many great things from him. This guy, I am to this day afraid for him to grab me and throw me. The hardest I've ever been thrown in my life. He touched me and I was on the floor, and I'm like, I felt like my life had been taken away from me at that one moment. And he's laughing. And it was just, he has that ability, that energy about him. And I went, wow, that was so real. And he's going to be teaching at the conference this year on kind of that concept of realization of the essential. And I tell people, you need to see this or hear what he's got to put out there, because I've experienced it firsthand. And that's one reason Jeff Rhodes, his senior student, is so darn good. Of course, I mentioned Vitas Bilking. We later after Hanshi Abel passed, he was kind of the guy I looked to, because he was Mr. Abel's most senior student. I was next in line, but he was my guy. I looked at him. I looked for instruction. He would come and spend, as you know, months here in the States, and he would stay with me. And we had some of the best times just training in the house or out in the yard. And I gained so much from those experiences, because Vitas just had an interesting, another view of what we do. And of course, having Mr. Abel as his teacher and then his own input, the way he saw it, it was like Mr. Abel intensified, I guess you could say. It was another, like Mr. Abel plus kind of thing, training with Vitas. And then, of course, Hanshi Bowles, he's head of the ISA, and he's done a lot of wonderful things for me. I respect him greatly, and I enjoy going to his events up in Fort Wayne. And he's like another kind of a big father figure for Shuri-Ryu. And it's nice to still have kind of that person I can go to, or someone I can, consult. And he looks after me, and I greatly appreciate him doing that. Because once your teacher's gone, you don't want to feel like you're in the wilderness.
Right.
And he's there, and that's meant a lot to me. Some of my first Bagua training was Bonham Park, who's up in Virginia. He's in Richmond. He really opened up my eyes, in that aspect. And then later with Paul Cody, with Xingyi and Bagua. And he's, not only a good friend, talking about videotapes, we've been videotaping his system, and he's a senior student of Robert Smith. And Paul was able to fill in a lot of gaps of the Xingyi aspect of our karate. He'll see us do something, and immediately he'll see it within the Xingyi, and he can kind of give me that perspective. Tom Ryan for the jiu-jitsu, and there again, I learned a lot of my healing arts I got from Tom Ryan. And matter of fact, this year at the conference, he's going to be teaching some Kapo, which are some of the healing arts. But I went through the massage program with him, the Danzanryu Seifu Jitsu, and that there again gave me a whole different perspective on the physical, on the body itself, looking at anatomy and physiology, as well as the healing part. Even though Mr. Abel, people don't realize he did. We used to do spinal adjustments, even though we probably weren't supposed to. But he could adjust almost every joint in the body. one of his students was a chiropractor, and so he would go and train with this guy to basically learn bone setting. And so that was a part of, Mr. Abel always had that concept: if you're going to hurt them, you better be able to fix them. So we would actually, in advanced class, do training in anatomy and physiology, kinesiology, and then bone setting, and then adding the massage from Tom Ryan in on that gave me maybe a fuller picture of that whole aspect. Other people would be like Doug Perry. He's been a good friend and mentor for many, many years. I met him when I was a white belt. There again, another little short, powerful guy who inspired me. And then I did some Aikido with Fumio Toyota, which a lot of the techniques I do today are pieces of things that I got from him. And I'm just going to throw some other names out here that have been incredibly influential and still are. Darren Myers. And of course, we spoke about Soki Kuniba influencing what I do. People like Jeff Rhodes, I learned a lot from him. Alex Ramaza, Mark Baker, Robert Taylor, Bob Speed, one of my senior students. He has another perspective. He's an engineer, and he'll see me do something, and he'll have an interesting view, and he'll go, "What do you think about this?" And he's always so humble about it, And I'm like, "Bob, that was amazing. I never thought about that." He has changed the way I do technique and my footwork because of something that Bob Speed mentioned to me. And, that's why I said you can learn from everyone if you just have a humble spirit about you to just listen and don't think that you know it all, or because this person's not some big mucky muck, like you can't learn from them. There's so many people in our Kai that I get things from all the time. And that's why I said it goes back to the more people I can bring in, the better it is, Right. So.
Excellent. Boy, what a great list of names. That's wow. And
there's a bigger list, but
yeah. And I know there's more. I know there's, probably many more and all. And it goes back to, like what you're saying, to what Hanshi Abel said, leave your ego at the door, and you're going to learn. Now, this coming October, you're going to be hosting the 2021 Shuri-Te Martial Arts International Conference in South Carolina. And this, I put on a lot of events. I know it's a huge undertaking to organize. And I took the time to count. You've got 43 instructors. Count that, 43 instructors who don't all want to teach at the same time because they want to learn from each other at all, with over 200 participants. So I think you've told us kind of how this came to be from Ridgely Abel. What can people expect this year?
Well, each year we have at least usually 5 sessions going, about every hour and 10 minutes. And you pick and choose what you want to train. And there's different tracks. Like there's a karate track, a jiu-jitsu track, we call Chinese martial arts track, which would include, other arts like Kung Tao Silat. There's usually some weapons training. There's some healing arts. There's all kinds of different things. So each hour there's kind of a different, depending on what you're interested in, it's not all the same stuff. It's something different, a different type of art. And, pick and choose. You don't have, if you're tired, you don't have to train every session. There's no pressure. I want you to come and enjoy the time there. I want you to train, but I also want you to meet people and interact. So part of it is really about that fellowship. We always have something special planned. I'm working on some things this year since we weren't able to do it last year. Real funny joke. I still have some of the polo shirts you did for me last year. And we always say, get your special edition polo shirt from the conference that never was.
Way to go. Fantastic marketing.
But we always have some special things planned. It's a chance where we can recognize people as well. So this year, hopefully we got it figured out, the best way to do it. The great thing about it is, come and train for 3 days. We provide lunch for you on Saturday. It's just a good time. It's a beautiful facility. The hotel's only about 4 years old because the first conference we had there, I think they had just finished the hotel like 6 months earlier. And then the area that it's in, it's right in the middle of this little planned community where they have all these boutiques, restaurants, shops. The great thing is they've completed that area, so now all of the shops are open, all of the restaurants are open.
Great.
You walk directly outside the hotel, and there's everything you possibly need. So once you park, you don't need to go anywhere. That's why I tell people,
beautiful place, beautiful.
If you're flying in, I'll come pick you up at the airport. I know that's crazy, but I do it because you don't need to go anywhere. Once you get to the hotel, everything's right there. So come join us, and of course you'll be there. And
yes, I will.
So
Wouldn't miss it.
It's always a great time. And then I just want to throw this out. Have you set dates for your winter camp next year?
Yes, we have. Still working with the hotel right now, but February, I believe it's 4th, 5th, and 6th, the first weekend in February, in Nags Head, North Carolina. We'll be having our, I'm not sure how many this is. It's a lot.
Right. It's over 30.
34th, something like that, winter camp. And and of course, you will be there. So, join us there too. Fantastic. I could keep going for another hour if it's okay with you. We'll just keep rolling. But
sorry,
real quickly, no. This has been fantastic. And those people who have hung in there, I'm sure they have learned a lot. I've learned a lot about you, a lot about your thoughts and your philosophies and all. For the young student, the person who's in the trenches, so to speak, and they're coming to karate class or whatever art they're studying every day, what advice can you give to those young people who they're the future of what we do, and they want to get to their black belt? What kind of advice can you give them?
Well, one thing we've already brought up, just show up.
Yep.
Mr. Abel always said, ultimately, a lot of times you can only judge the student on their attendance. Everybody has different physical skill. Some people are going to get this, some people are not. But, at some point, if they're showing up and they're putting forth effort, it's all about the trying, it's all about the doing. And you can't do it if you don't show up. So, we'd always say it's about attendance and effort. And if you just keep doing that, at some point, you'll get there.
Right.
The other thing is, don't put limits on yourself and don't allow others to put limits on you. That can truly hamper your success. Over the years, I've had the naysayers, and just ignore it.
Right.
I have to say, even my own family, when I first started training karate, they were, one of my sisters is like, yeah, that'll last 2 months.
And of course, support group, right?
Right.
Mine were the same way.
It was kind of funny, and then it's very unusual because I think here it is, almost 40 years, and in 2019, two of my sisters who had never really come to anything martial arts related ever showed up and stayed at the hotel and was there for my conference.
Oh, wow.
And they were just amazed. They were like, we had no idea, what you have done, who you were, what you were all about.
Yeah. And
to see what went on at the conference, they were so proud, and it meant a lot to me that they showed up. And they were just like, wow, we wish we had been involved more, earlier, right, or been more supportive. And I remember when I first got my yellow belt, which is probably the most difficult exam you ever take, right? The first one. I remember my mom came over, and she was always very supportive. So she came over to see what I was doing, and she was watching some green belts do kata, and she's like, oh, do you do that? And I said, oh, no, that's way beyond me. Maybe in a couple of years I'll be able to do what they're doing. I still had that, where I wasn't very confident about it.
Right.
And, so I was kind of like, well, maybe one day in the future. And it's funny how it kind of sneaks up on you, because all of a sudden, you keep showing up for class, you keep doing what your teacher tells you to do, and then before you know it, you're doing that green belt kata. And you're going, well, that wasn't too bad. And then you get your next promotion, you go, wow, I did that. And before you know it, you realize there's no limits.
Yeah.
Only the ones you put on yourself.
Absolutely.
And once you realize, don't put those limits on there. And I tell people, things that I can do now, I wasn't aware that I wasn't supposed to be able to do them.
You don't know what you don't know.
So in a sense, people go, wow, how did you do that? I go, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. Let me see what happens. Let's try something. I don't know. And so if you tell the student, just don't put limits on yourself or limitations, and don't let others limit your success.
Excellent.
Just keep training. So
keep showing up. That's it. So what's in the future for Troy Price and the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai?
Well, the SBK, it's funny, how do I say, we're open, the organization's kind of open for everybody, but at the same time, we don't take everybody. And I don't mean that in a negative way. We have a little joke, no butt heads allowed. Right?
We've seen a few.
Right. That being said, Mr. Abel always had an open door policy, and I do say, someone might come in and this is what they need, right? Maybe they're not, the right energy initially, but generally people adapt to the environment, right? So the environment you create might be what is the catalyst to change that person's life.
Right.
So if you didn't give them that opportunity to change, then that it was very unfortunate for that person. So that's why I said everyone's welcome. But at the same time, we want a certain energy. If you're not have the ability to recognize those three principles that I talked about, right? Principle over personality, cooperation, continued study, you will probably leave yourself. So we always say we're somewhat self-regulating, right? Because people come in and go, wow, what an incredible environment. This is exactly what I want or need. So, we say we're open, but generally if it's not what you want or need, then, no hard feelings if you go, okay, that's not what I want to be a part of. I don't care. It doesn't, I'm not out recruiting people is what I'm saying.
Right, right.
We hope that the people in our group and the energy that we put out is enough of an attractor to have people want to be part of our group. And every year at the conference, I give memberships. I go, you're somebody that I've seen here. You're showing the right energy. I really want you to be part of our group. And it's an invitation. I always say, please accept my invitation to be part of my group.
There you go.
Instead of them going, I want to be, come be a part of my group. I really like what you do.
Right.
And luckily I haven't had anyone, turn that down.
Right. Sure.
Because I remember at your winter camp one year, I showed up with certificates of membership, and I said, I'd really like to bring, Hanshi Darren Myers, at that time, I think it might have been Shihan Darren Myers, into the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai officially, even though you were already part of the group.
Right, yeah.
but we're like, I want to officially document that you're part of the group, and luckily you accepted that. So part of that is just, trying to make the SBK successful by, how to say, having the right energy, wanting everyone to be successful. And that's really the goal of the Kai. We're just a vehicle or another resource to help you become successful. Excellent. And in turn, you're helping us be successful.
Right.
And then, of course, for me, just continue training. I have a little joke. I'm doing my old man training today. So I'm trying to develop my efficiency of motion, my internal power, because I want to be that 80-year-old man that just, knocks people out, you know what I mean? Or knocks them down, and not in a mean way, but I'm just going, I want to be that bad old man.
There you go.
So
I love that. That's good.
And then of course I've still got lots of filming. I mean, I was looking at my list. I have a kind of an outline of what I haven't filmed yet, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe we have 40% on film. There's a whole lot more we want to do.
Yeah.
And of course, like I said before, I really hope that at the end of the day, I can say Hanshi Abel was proud.
Yes.
for me, that's kind of my, I've got hopefully 40, maybe 40, 50 more years that I can make Mr. Abel proud.
That's great. And I will guarantee he would be. I can feel that in my heart for sure. So this has been wonderful. This has been fantastic. I really have enjoyed it. It's been our longest interview so far, which is wonderful. Now, how can people find out more about Kyoshi Troy Price and the Shuri-Te Bu-Jutsu Kai?
Well, the best way is, you can go to our website.
There it
which
is there.
Just www.sbkma.com. So it's sbkma.com.
There you go.
And, you can give me a call. I mean, it's unusual. I'll get calls from folks all the time that I've never met, and we'll have a great conversation. At the end of the call, it's like I've known them forever. And, I'm approachable. You understand what I mean. We've been to events where you go to meet a certain teacher and they are very unapproachable. It's hard to, you try to talk to them and they ignore you, or they don't want to talk to you, or you're beneath them or whatever. And, Mr. Abel was never like that. He loved to talk to people. Dr. Yang Ming, amazing guy. He loved to talk to people. Just walk up and speak to him. Luckily, he met my wife, which was helped me. Immediately had that connection.
Fantastic.
Annie and his wife actually became good friends, and that really helped me when I'd go up and train with him. But he was just that guy. You could go in the office and just have a nice conversation. Yeah. And I go, I want to be like that.
There you go.
So that's just give us a call. And last thing, and Annie warned me about being long-winded. So sorry if that's the case. And I was very nervous. I'm like,
she knows you well, doesn't she?
I'm like, I'm going to freeze up. I go, it's going to be 2 minutes. I don't have anything to say.
This has been fantastic. And first of all, I want to thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your stories. And thank you for your friendship. Thank you for the wonderful times we've had together. And I look forward to so many more. And for those of you who have enjoyed this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It's right over there, I do believe. And subscribe to the channel. We're trying to build it up. If you've got any thoughts, any comments, please leave them. I'll pass them on to Kyoshi Price, and we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to see it. Let us know about anybody else you'd like us to interview. We've got a long list, but we're glad to throw somebody else in there, that's for sure. Troy, thank you again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in October.
Yes, sir. Yes,
all
sir.
Right.
So we got you all set up, ready to go.
All right, fantastic. And thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week on Black Belt Life.